All right. What's up, everybody? And welcome to episode 144 of the Designated Players Podcast. Today, we dive into a series we've been very, very excited to start. We have asked fans of every MLS team what their favorite moments in MLS history were related to that team. From the first 10 teams in the league to league teams that just joined in the last 2 years. Every single fan got a chance to give us some of their favorite moments in MLS history. We have over 400 of the best stories, games, goals, and moments that MLS fans have decided are the most important to their team and to the history of MLS. And in this series, we're going to tell that story. From free draft days of 1996 MLS to the greatest MLS Cup final of all time in 2022 and every story in between. This is the history of MLS as decided by the fans and as told by the Designated Players Podcast. Today, we're diving into the story of how the New York, New Jersey Metro Stars in the inaugural player draft drafted Juninho and Tulio, two big-name Brazilian stars, or so they thought. On the second half of the show, we will remember the first ever goal in MLS history scored by Eric Wynalda for the San Jose Clash. Sit tight and get ready for some crazy stories from early MLS history. Connor, how you doing, bud? You excited?
I am always excited for story time.
I'm telling you, doing this research and doing the collection of all of this information got me so excited for what this is going to be. I mean, the stories that we're going to tell in this series are stories that created lifelong fans. I mean, every other story had a comment underneath it saying, I remember this. This is the reason I started following this team. This is the reason I haven't left since day one. It is so cool to see how all of these stories intertwine, create not only the history of a team, but the history of the league itself. So I'm super excited. I hope you are too. But before we do that, of course, we can't just forget about the greatest segment of all time, Scarf of the Week. What are you rocking today?
I'm on theme, of course, considering I will be telling the story of the first ever MLS goal. I've brought out the San Jose Earthquake scarf.
I like that. I've got that right
Somewhere over there.
right there. It's somewhere.
I see it.
Yeah, there it is. I see it.
I see it.
Um, I myself, of course, telling the story of early Metro. Do not have a Metro scarf, unfortunately. I should find one, but we're rocking a Red Bull scarf, of course. This one, not the original one. I've used the original one too many times. So broken out one I haven't had much of before. And we're rocking it today. We're rocking it. But what else do you want to add before we get going here?
Nothing. I mean, I'll try to jump in. I'll ask some questions, throw in the hype ad libs as you tell your story, really
So, so
spice it up.
I guess here's my question. Do you know what this story is about?
No clue.
You are going to lose your
So
mind.
I'm learning this for the first time. Like I'm sure many of the viewers will probably be learning it for the first time as well, also.
You are going to love it. So let's flash back all the way before the first ball was even kicked in MLS. Let's tell the story of how the league got started. So to create teams for our wonderful league, we started as we mean to go on. We had a draft because who doesn't love a good draft in MLS? On January 5th, 1995, MLS began signing and then allocating what they called marquee players to each of its 10 teams. 40 total players would be signed, given to each of the 10 teams. So they had 4 players to start off with, building around for their team. We're talking about the Metro today. So just a brief recap. Metro were allocated the Italian midfielder Roberto Donadoni, American goalkeeper Tony Meola, American midfielder Tab Ramos, and another American midfielder named Damian Silvera. Jumping ahead, we get to the MLS inaugural draft, February 6th and 7th of 1996. In this draft, this is basically the beginning of discovery rights, is the way that in my research I found it. Any player in the world was up for grabs, assuming you could, of course, sign, right? If you could pay the fee and get it across, you were basically saying, I got dibs on this guy, we're going to sign them. Most players came from within whatever feeble soccer pyramid was existent at the time in 1996 USA. But some names did make the trip overseas. Brian McBride and from Wolfsburg and Raul Diaz Arce from Firpo in El Salvador were some players who came from outside of America. The draft lasted 16 rounds. We haven't seen anything like it since, and we probably never will. 1 month later, on March 4th, 1996, two more drafts were held. One, the college draft, which is what we now know as the MLS Super Draft, presented by Adidas. The other, what was called the supplemental draft. And the supplemental draft is where we get this story from. I'm going to turn on my light so you can see my face. In the second and third round of the supplemental draft, the New York, New Jersey Metro Stars drafted a couple of Brazilian playmakers named Juninho and Tulio, respectively. One of them was believed to be tearing it up in the Premier League with Middlesbrough, while the other was thought to be leading a highly touted Brazilian squad in the Olympics later that year. Usually, when teams drafted players, they were certain that they could sign them. You forget what team we're talking about. Even though these players were listed with their team names and their ages and all this different information about them, New York, New Jersey Metro Star front office decided to ignore all of that and just assume that the name on the sheet was the best player in the world. So after days of radio silence about the location, estimated times of arrivals, or even identities of these players, it was announced that the Metro, and I quote, never actually drafted these two Brazilians. And before they even stepped foot in the USA, they were officially waived to make the transaction complete. So 2 of their 16 to 20 players that they drafted for this opening year never stepped foot in the United States. Now, you may think that this is where it ends. But you are oh so wrong, Connor. Because I can see it on your face like, oh, that's not too fun. Remember how we talked about how people thought Juninho was the Brazilian in the Premier League? And how he had team names listed next to him that were just completely ignored? Juninho was a player in the third division of Brazilian football that MLS signed on a free transfer. But because the name was so popular, the Metro just assumed it was the good one and never did any more research. So they drafted this guy who had no intention of coming over to the MLS. And I say the MLS because 96, right? That's what they called it back then. But no desire to come over. And it gets better because his true identity, who he really was unknown for years. He never stepped foot in MLS. Nobody spoke about him, and nobody knew who he was. It was just this legend of Juninho who never came over, and we don't know if he even existed. He pops up years later with the Puerto Rico Islanders in USL, and it's then tied all the way back to say, oh, that's the guy who Metro drafted in 96. And it gets better. Jump over to our friend Tulio, who, again, was cast away before ever stepping foot in MLS. To this day, to March 11th, 2023, nobody, not even the best MLS historians, have any idea who this guy is. Never popped up in world football after that. Never popped up in any sort of transfer rumor, anything like that. We have yet to figure out who this guy was or if he even existed. There is no better story to me to kick off our history series than the greatest draft mishap of all time, and what I can likely say was labeled the first ever That's So Metro moment in history, drafting 2 players who were the wrong players, and one may not have even existed. Welcome to Metro, everybody.
Okay, walk this back for me for a second. So you gave a lot of information there. How does this work again? So they're drafting players that the league signed, or Red Bull signed these players and then they drafted them? How does this work again?
Early draft was essentially, my guess, and I can't be for sure because I didn't do very well in marketing, but it sounded like if you could make the deal work, like on your end, and it fit within the transfer rules, like if you said, hey, we want to take this guy for, $200,000 a year, and it fit under the transfer budget, no matter where he came from, he was yours. Now, Metro or MLS for the supplemental draft also signed some players on a free contract to say, hey, we're starting up a league, we want to buy your contract. And then teams might try to you might go to any team in the world or in the country, but you'll have a contract. So that's what it sounded like the supplemental draft was. Again, that is to my best guess. People who are listening can help me out there. But that is to my best guess that in the original 16 rounds, it was basically if you had an ability to sign him based off of your own network of scouting, for lack of a better term. If you could do that, then you were able to get him. But the supplemental was a bunch of people they signed just on the free. So that's why everybody was so confused, because they were they didn't believe that a Brazilian midfielder from the English Premier League fell to the 18th round of an MLS draft.
Yeah, I don't know what was the league thinking when they signed a player, I guess that was, and didn't give like enough information to make it seem like it was the wrong Juninho, and signed another player that just doesn't exist. Like somebody out there has to know who that guy is, because they signed him. So they have to know like who it was. Maybe I don't know, can you not like track down who this person was that signed him?
We have tried day after day for years to try and find this man, and nobody has figured out who it is. Some people believe that his name was also Juninho. That was a story that came up, that they just signed a bunch of Juninhos and hoped one of them stuck. So in Metro Stars era on Wikipedia, which is taken from a soccerpubs.com article, which I believe, it does. It's from Metro Fanatic, which is one of my favorite Red Bull websites, where I got a lot of this information. So thank you, Metro Fanatic. The identity of Juninho was later discovered, and the true name and club history of Tulio remains unknown. And that is where it ends. We still have yet to figure it out. Maybe one day we will. I doubt it, but I think almost we would not want to figure it out, because then it ruins this part of MLS history if we figure it out.
I don't know if it ruins it. It's still hilarious that Red Bull just drafted players, I guess, just off of vibes, basically.
Ooh, hold on. I think we found it.
You found out who Tulio is?
Edivaldo Juninho da Silva was the original Juninho. But no, there is nothing left about Tulio.
I mean, I'm looking at a guy right now. There is a Brazilian striker whose name was Tulio Humberto Pereira Costa from Brazil.
If you go to the MLS 1996 inaugural player draft, there is a Tulio on there, and it'd be the allocation draft, but it is a guess. It has been very, very put out there that the XV de Piracicaba. Oh, sorry. It's a Brazilian club. It is a guess. There is no page for Tulio in Wikipedia. The position is a forward, but the team is a guess. That is what has circulated around MLS lore, and that is kind of where we leave it.
Look, here's what I'm gonna say. I'm looking at a Tulio right now, Brazilian forward, and it looks like he was without a club for some point between 1996 and 1997.
You may have solved it. You may have solved it then, but
that's all I'm saying.
There is no official record in MLS, in anything of that official record, that states that guy is who we drafted. We still haven't concretely accepted.
Yeah, no, I get that. You probably can't say it for certain unless you get something a bit more official to confirm it. But I don't know. I mean, I would possibly be interested in looking a bit more into this guy. Maybe this is the guy that we're looking for. Who knows? But this guy's list of teams that he played for is genuinely absurd. I'm like 20 plus teams. No joke.
I think I see the
Crazy.
guy you're talking about.
Yeah. Had 15 caps for Brazil. He scored 13 goals in those 15 games.
Which is
If
why I
this is the
don't
guy,
which is
that kind
why
of
we
sucks.
don't think that's the guy. Because he
Well,
made
is
his
this too
debut in
good?
1990. There's no way that he falls into the 19th round of an MLS draft if this is the guy, right?
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, because he
Um,
had like 100 goals by the time it was 1996 in his career.
yeah. So, um, yeah.
Maybe it
So,
was. Maybe people just passed up on him just out of
and
lack of knowledge.
it wouldn't
And,
shock me, right?
and Red Bull did their homework, but they just didn't do their homework correctly, I guess.
uh, we love it. We love it.
Anyway,
Shall we
is there
jump
anything else
over
to add,
to
or
the
does that
second
wrap
one?
up our? Yeah, does that
Yeah.
wrap up our That's So Metro moment?
For now, yeah.
All right.
We'll have plenty
All
more,
right.
don't
Well,
you worry.
oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. All right. Well, I'll take over here. I'll talk a little bit about the first goal in MLS history. And I want you to definitely jump in at any point if you've got something to say, if you got questions. I'll try to incorporate you in and, ask you a couple things when I can. But let's start off on a nice day on April 6th, 1996, where MLS is set to make their debut with a match between the San Jose Clash, who we now know as the San Jose Earthquakes, and DC United. It is a sold out crowd of 31,683 people packed into Spartan Stadium at San Jose State University. If anything screams MLS more than their first ever game being at a college stadium, I don't know what. I mean, I think that's great. But 31,000 people is a way bigger crowd than I was expecting. If you had to, I probably should have had you guess ahead of time, but would you have guessed 32,000 people would show up to the first ever game?
Yes,
Yeah.
because because it's the new cool thing, right? We've talked about that before.
Yeah, but do you think people would really care about soccer in 1996?
Yeah, it was coming right off of or right before, right after a World Cup. Of course, it was.
Yeah, guess that makes sense. Well, anyway, I was actually able to find a full video of the match. I didn't watch the full thing because I have a life and I didn't want to watch 0-0 game for 88 minutes between the San Jose Clash and DC United. Believe it or not how I wanted to spend my Saturday. But I'll give you a little bit of tidbits of information from what I was able to see in the kind of brief clips I was looking at. ESPN was the broadcaster for the first game. I know it's pretty sad, especially now that we get to see Apple TV and what they're capable of. Little tidbit here before the game, they had a clip of a parachuter coming onto the field. Nothing important about that, but just thought it was interesting. And the quality of the match as well, just like TV wise, unsurprisingly, because it's 1996. A lot worse than the Atlanta Charlotte game I had in the background. I'll tell you that much. But anyway, let's move into a little bit of more the game itself. I did want to add that, like, while this was the first game for MLS, I don't believe this was the first organized soccer game in American history. I believe there were leagues before this that, I guess, maybe not to the same level that MLS was bringing to the table, but there were other organized leagues that had, American soccer games. But
You are.
obviously, MLS is the
I
what?
was going to say you're correct, and I did want to throw in there. We have some honorable mentions on this list that will not make it in here. That include things like the '91 merger, when we tried to create a league and it failed, and then the D2 merger that also tried and failed. There are lots of leagues that tried and failed in American history that we are leaving off of this list to focus just on MLS.
Yeah. Um, and so just some other things that I noticed throughout the game before we got to the point of the goal. I believe that they actually stopped the clock for injuries. I don't know how long that they did this for, or why they did this, but I believe Richie Williams I believe was a player. I think he had some kind of a hamstring injury or a cramp or something. The trainers had to come out, and I believe I heard the announcers say that they stopped the clock for these injuries. So rather than adding it on into injury time, they would just stop it, which I guess for the sake of making the timing more accurate, in this case, it probably be a bit more accurate than just tacking on the time in extra time, where it's probably more of an estimate. And then you don't know if like how much later or shorter the referee will go on in the injury time. But one other thing, there were no electronic boards. So when they substituted out players, they just held up the laminated number. I thought that was pretty funny, but I guess it also kind of makes sense. I had to do something before that there was an electronic board, but for some reason, I just wasn't expecting a laminated number to be held up. Anyway, let's jump into the starting lineups. Now, I'll go through for DC and San Jose. I'm curious to know how many of these players you actually remember. So for DC, and I apologize ahead of time, I am going to absolutely butcher these names. But we got Jeff Causey in goal, Saeed Fazlagic in defense with Jeff Agus,
Goose.
Thor Lee, Agus, whatever. Close enough. Thor Lee, Sean Medved, Mario Gori, John Harkes, Richie Williams, Mauro Echeverri, Berthie Suarez, and Raul Diaz Arce.
5.
Which 5?
I was holding them up while you were saying
I wasn't paying attention to you. I was reading my list.
Ooh. I got Arce, Echeverri, Williams, Agus, and Harkes.
Nice. And then for San Jose, we got Tom Liner, Tim Martin, John Doyle, Michael Emenalo, Troy Dayak, Ben Aroa, Paul Bravo, Jorge Rodas, Victor Maya, Jeff Butcher, and Eric Wynalda.
It'd be 2.
Who was the other one besides Wynalda? I missed that one.
Troy Dayak, because he's part of this list later on.
See, I could see you're not a Chelsea fan because Michael Emenalo is the technical director for Chelsea for like 5 or 6 years.
Wow, you know so much ball, bro.
Yeah, what can I say? I do mystery. I do my homework. All right, so let's get to the goal. Luckily, I was able to find the clip, so I can break down exactly what happens. So, goal came in the 88th minute. A cleared ball falls to Ben Iroa on the left side of the field. He took the ball. He beats Thor Lee around the mid part of the field. Lays it off to Wynalda, who's out on the left wing. Wynalda cooks Jeff Agus, cuts it to his right foot and curls it into the far right side of the net for the first goal in MLS history. And it ended up, obviously, for those who know, being the game-winning goal, giving San Jose the first win in MLS history. Although if people know the history, there would have been a winner in this game no matter what, because if the game ended tied, they would have went to a penalty shootout to decide the winner. And I'm sure people have seen the clips of the penalty shootouts back in the days. I don't remember if they started that from the first season. I mean, maybe you know better. But the running up 1v1 penalty types have been shown on like Instagram and stuff. Yeah. But Wijnaldum's goal in the 88th minute ended up being the game winner. It was a very nice goal, I have to say. Ball control was really great. Cut it onto his right foot, found a bit of pocket of space, just curled it so well into the right side of the net. And I thought what was peak ESPN MLS coverage right after Wynalda scores and everybody's celebrating, they shrink the screen so that they could show NBA and MLB scores.
I
Because
didn't know that.
that's ESPN for you. Yeah. So unsurprisingly, that's how they decided to celebrate the first goal in MLS history, was to distract with NBA and MLB scores. So thank you, Apple TV, for seeing us all. So
Fantastic.
a little bit of history afterwards. How did things shape up for San Jose and DC the rest of the season, you might ask? Well, after this first loss for DC, they followed it up with 3 more losses, therefore starting their franchise with 4 straight losses. Fantastic way to start things off. However, if you know MLS history, you know that will not have continued for the rest of the season. DC was able to turn their season around and become the first MLS Cup winners in MLS Cup history, defeating the LA Galaxy in the MLS Cup final. San Jose kind of followed suit. Despite their win on opening day, followed it up with a 3-game losing streak. Fantastic stuff. San Jose ended up making it to the playoffs despite having a 12-17-3 record. The 3 in this case is not ties. The 3 is 3 shootout wins. I guess shootout wins probably just got less points than regular wins.
Yeah, probably like 1.
And the reason that yeah, that's what I think too. And the reason that they made the playoffs is because 80% of the league made the playoffs in the first season. 8 out of 10 teams were in the playoffs. Literally, the only 2 teams that didn't make it were the Revs and the Rapids. So, unsurprisingly, 3 teams during that season had a losing record and still made the playoffs. San Jose ultimately got knocked out by the Galaxy in a best 2 out of 3 series. Wynalda, the goal scorer, if you're wondering about his history going forward after scoring the first goal in MLS history, he had a pretty solid career. It would span against many MLS sides, including the Quakes, or the Clash, as we know, Miami Fusion, the Revs, and Chicago Fire. He had about 35 goals during his time with MLS, and he tacked on another 34 goals in 106 games for the USMNT. Take a breather.
Take
Any
a breather.
questions?
Any questions? You've got questions, you've got comments, you've got things you want to add. Let us know in the comments wherever you are watching this video or this episode. But to do that, you got to make sure you're following us. Isn't that right? Can't do that if you're not following us. Thanks so much for listening to the first episode of MLS history. We're going to come up with a catchier name for that. That doesn't sound very catchy, but we'll get it. We'll get better. But it's the first episode of our MLS history recap. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening, for watching. Please, please, please comment things that you want us to look into and talk about. Like I said, we have 400 of these stories that we're going to tell over the next, going to take probably a year, isn't it? So if you see something that you think we should talk about, we'll check it with our list and add it on if we have to. But we want to tell this story as best as we can and make sure that you guys are learning as we go along. So make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on all forms of social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. We'll post this all over the place so that you guys know when these episodes are going live. And we will catch you on the next episode of the Designated Players Podcast, MLS History Edition. See ya.